Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last Jewish Wisdom for Coping with the Pandemic in 2021. When we started in March 2020, I had no idea we would be going this long in many respects, but here we are, and I'm so glad that you have been with me for this journey. I know some of you, this might be your first or second time, and some of you have been here just about every time, but you are all very welcome. Today we'll begin, as we always do, with a short meditation to create a sacred space. So please relax and get comfortable in your chair and close your eyes. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And as thoughts come into your head, just observe them and let them pass. Like watching a car pass by on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema, and on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. And Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. And Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Hello, Stephanie, welcome. Well, friends, this is our second week of exploring the Musar soul trait of trust. The Hebrew is Bitachon. It's talking about trusting in the divine. And so my question to get us started is, how did that trust in the divine show up for you next week? We talked a bit about, I talked in my email this week about reaching out to other people. We talked about that a bit last week. So I'll copy this so I can put it in the chat. Or we can do a general check-in. Who would like to begin?
It's Karen.
Hey, Karen.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I have some thoughts working on trust this past week and related to last week's discussion.
Great.
I was thinking about, the mantra and how I manage trust. So these are my thoughts. Why not is the question. Not why, because that's easily answered, but why not? Silence the inner critic is the action, and expand my comfort zone, increase the boundary is my mantra for trust.
Well, thank you. And was that kind of helpful to you as you went through the week, or what kind of impact did that mantra have, if you'd like to share?
It wasn't so much that it had a particular impact this week, but it was thinking about situations where I really needed to trust. And for me, trust was that leap. It was both feet in. And there is something, and I don't remember who wrote this, that trust, that if you're going to trust with a backup plan, it's like having, 1 foot in and one on the ground. And for me, trust was about taking that leap.
Mhm.
And when I thought about how I could work that into a mantra, I came up with the why not, which is the question, and then the action, and then a mantra that would be brief to say, ask, don't listen to your inner critic, which comes from a lot of writing classes that I've had.
Wow.
That can stifle an ability to move forward. And then the mantra, and I didn't want to just say leap in.
Mhm.
So I thought better to say expand that boundary.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you, Karen. I really love that because leap in is kind of an energy that can go with enthusiasm or zerazu, which we were working on a couple of weeks ago, but this is much more nuanced. It's not being held back. It's not listening to the inner critic. And the result might be moving forward, but it's with a very different sort of resonance is what I'm hearing. So that's really cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Hey, Joanne, welcome. We are doing a bit of a check-in. I'll repost our question in the chat. And we're basically just saying, how did trust show up for you? Or for those people who weren't here last week, they want to check in about how maybe the Musar practice or mindfulness showed up, or any sort of questions or concerns that are up for you now. We're happy to listen to those too. Would anyone else care to share or check in? Okay, well, that is fine. Oh, wait, Hannah.
Yeah, that trust has been a something I've thought about a lot this year, and hadn't realized how much I kind of want to know people's parameters so I can trust them like the way I trust a tiger. Like I trust them that if I go in their cage, they'll try to eat me, but if I let them out here, they're beautiful. Like sort of like that's been my way of figuring out how to deal with. I had a pretty physically dangerous life for a very long time. So that's been my way of letting go of that, right? Is to go, okay, I trust, trust a tiger to be a tiger. This other level of trust about kind of like my future, I don't know how to go more in that direction, but having a lot of what ifs in my head about sort of what if things go wrong, and then lately really trying to then add an out loud thought of what if things go right, what if it does work, as opposed to having backup plans to my backup plans, or sort of I don't know, leaping to the defense of myself and others, really. So I'm in a situation where I'm actually really free to go now and trying to figure out what to do with that. And I do feel like I have this trust that you have when you're a little kid, in some ways, where, the world is a big, beautiful, wonderful place. And I guess trusting myself to be okay, to be prepared, and not to have to be constantly preparing. I don't know, some thoughts.
Well, Hannah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your journey. And I think, Musar is very much about where we are as individuals, and sort of the kinds of questions you're asking yourself are the kinds of questions we all should be asking ourselves as we kind of go along and figure out, based on what I've been through and what's going on, and based on kind of what the tradition has to teach, and the tradition poses some guiding questions and some guiding principles. What are my appropriate appropriate actions. So thank you again for sharing that. Yes, Karen.
I'm thinking about how much trust is really an act of vulnerability. And where I see other traits on a spectrum, I haven't figured out yet where trust would be somewhere on a spectrum and not at one end. And so I think to really trust means you're giving up something to do that. That full trust is not holding back. It's not a backup plan. So I wonder if anybody else has a place for trust on the spectrum that puts something else to one end of it, where the fear of fully trusting would be at the opposite end.
We'll be looking at a spectrum later, but I'd love to hear, I see Bonnie's hand. Yeah, what are your thoughts? Remember to unmute, please.
I'm not sure if it's a spectrum, but just a separate thought. The term for security is bitachon. I didn't realize until you said that. Living in Israel, it's the term that I heard all the time, that it's trust. And of course it is, because it's security. But you also last week were talking about faith and trust. And so I went back to see, and in my mind, the word wasn't trust, it was truth, which is a totally different Hebrew shoresh, but it's very close to faith. So for me, trust, truth, and faith all come together. That if trust, truth, and faith I can't separate them. If I have trust in something, then I believe it's truthful, and I believe I have faith in that it's going to be accurate. Not really on a spectrum. It's just things that seem to work together for me, and especially because truth and faith use the same three letters in the Hebrew shoresh, in the root.
Thank you, Bonnie. I love that insight about the shoresh. And so many of these connect with one another. You know, these are branches from the same tree. Yes, Randy.
Yeah, a little bit like Bonnie was saying, I've been thinking on trust and a little bit with your last question, because I went back and did the spider graph again, and I got thinking, well, that's sort of in one dimension, and that if I can have too little trust in some things and too much in others, and if I try to change that in a human way, those things are attached to other things. And if I imagine, all the soul trait or musar soul trait characteristics, in 3 dimensions, the question you asked, we can make changes from sort of on the outside in a small way, and that's good too. But sometimes there's things closer to that central point. So when you asked about trust, like in the universe or the divine, or I'm thinking of the next thing, loving kindness, somehow that is very similar to trust to me. And just in a very simple way, like with me, well, I have a tendency to want to be kind or charitable when I know what the effect is going to be, and that's not being trusting. and I thought, wow, there's a different wisdom in here that says, give to anybody that asks, or I need to stretch beyond. I need to have, I will benefit myself in coming in balance in doing that thing in a certain way that's more, I don't know how to say it. There's a wrong way, but I need to do that a little bit more with other people. And also with the universe or the divine. I think that really, if there was a string that attached to all the different characteristics that was around the middle, where if you were, because nobody can be perfect, we're not supposed to. You try to do one thing and it's like, oh, this whole other area of my life is spun out of control, or we'll say I think of like the new year where we think, oh, I'm going to diet, I'll lose 20 pounds and we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to just regular daily balance and habits, and everything will come. So that was my thought for the week.
Thank you, Randy. So much was there, but I saw Ellen Moranis, the famous Mozart teacher and author, speak once, and he talked about how he was practicing loving kindness, he was journaling. So we went back and read his journal for the week. He said, well, it's very clear to me, if like a homeless person was right in my path, I would give them money. But if they were across the street, or if they were kind of over here and I would have to go out of my way to give them money, I didn't do it. And so this is something he shared publicly, so I feel comfortable sharing it again. But it's kind of understanding that, we all have kind of our limits, and we all have an opportunity to go farther. And if we're really, really out of balance for something, I find it much easier to make progress. But when you're doing pretty well with something like love and kindness, and I imagine, maybe Alan is doing well in that area, but you really have to kind of push farther to keep making progress. You have to kind of go out of your way, because maybe some of the low-hanging fruit has been plucked, so to speak. And it's very tricky, because if we just say, oh, well, I'm going to start doing this, something over here might get unraveled. So it's really being mindful of sort of the full picture. And just in general, for the trend of comments that's been coming in, I think the divine is so large and so encompassing, that the fact that Bonnie is bringing in faith and truth with trust, and Randy's bringing in loving kindness, these are all kind of divine attributes. So it's fascinating to me that how deeply this can connect with us. Yes, Stephanie.
So I'm sorry that I haven't been here last week, because this topic is something that I struggle with. So I wondered, from just hearing what I've heard so far, is trust something that I can practice daily, and will it help to build more trust?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yeah, absolutely. And I think as our conversation today unfolds, sort of toward the end, we'll get to some examples of that. And if you want to talk offline about how that best can work for you, we could definitely do that. Yeah. Okay, Joanne.
Hi. Hi. I was thinking about, the continuum. I read Tehillim every week, because I'm in a group and we divide them up, the book of Tehillim up. And I guess one of the things King David says is like, trust in God, but don't trust man, don't trust princes, don't trust politicians, and then people, well, they might make mistakes, but if somebody's generally trustworthy. And so that's, to me, that's the continuum, and God isn't always kind to us, if we deserve, maybe we just, this is one of the things David is saying, don't blame me for the faults I have that I don't know about, be gentle, but, there's a prayer at night. It's like, forgive me for my sins, and don't, don't make a harsh suffering or illness in compensation for that. It's punishment kind of. So I mean, I guess it's like very variable trust. But of course, I think if we're trying to be good people and be kind and be generous to the extent we can and charitable, I think we can trust that God rewards it. And I feel that a basic trust that God will, and gratitude. I think gratitude is also, if you're grateful for many things in your life, that you have a roof over your head and you have enough food to eat and you have, some income and you're not on the street, then that sort of solidifies your trust in God, that he's going to not let you suffer that much and take care of you in some way.
Thank you, Joanne. Let's see, I have Frank and then Karen.
Let's see, a couple of things. I appreciated the mention of vulnerability earlier in our conversation, because that has to do a lot. So I want to just refer to that. The other is I'm kind of bringing in Einstein, and he said it's important for us, at least in his mind, to know, to experience that the world is friendly. And he felt that was important because somehow that will lead us in a certain way. And I think this has to do with trust in some ways. So I like to kind of share my own experiences rather than Einstein's. So this last week, my wife, Linda, and I are kind of more reticent than maybe some people being out there in the open. And Linda is even more so than I. And I just wanted to be at this family's gathering. And we were all going to test, that morning or the day before, and so we gathered, and I felt comfortable because everybody was tested. But I was the only one who wore a mask. And there were about 15 of us. And then on Monday, we hear that somebody came down with COVID. And so the question is, what have I learned from this? And my sense is that I'm not going to trust less. I'm going to be more careful. But trusting is, we don't know, like we mentioned, we don't know how the world, what happens. We don't know if it's COVID that's going to get us or something else. We don't know what's going to make us happy tomorrow. So I think, to me, not being too vulnerable is okay. But being able to pay the price, I think, for trusting, I think it's worth it. Until I guess it's proven wrong. So I would be less vulnerable. Feel less vulnerability, I think.
Well, thank you, Frank. One thing you said really I thought was very powerful is I'm not going to trust less, but I'm going to be more careful. And that very much ties in with the mantra, which some of you may remember, and we'll look at, should we ever get back to the slides, trust in God, but tie your camel. And there's a time to wear the mask. And that's, so thank you for sharing that. Okay, so we have Karen and then Hannah and then Carol.
Okay. We talk a lot about the evil inclination. And so I wonder if for people, that is the inner critic that needs to be silenced, because evil inclination is everywhere. And I think we need to put that aside to be able to engage in trust. And per the words that we just heard, I think that Frank trusted himself fully, and maybe was careful and cautious about others. And so if we're working on trust, maybe we can decide, for some people, it's easier to trust themselves fully, or to trust someone else fully, or to trust in the divine fully. But it doesn't sound like Frank didn't trust. It sounds like he did find 100% trust somewhere with himself, but not with others. And I think that counts, or that's a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Karen. Hannah.
There was something actually that came up this week, and I guess what I wanted to go back to is what Frank said about friendly world, friendly universe, and also Joanne. If you don't come from a place where you've had some of those basics, it becomes, I think it becomes harder to believe in a friendly universe. And yet, you know, especially say coming from something like, you know, folks who had kind of the karmic view of things that happened, or it's also, I guess, there's, I think, Booth, you're blessed by God, and if they're bad, then, you know, you must have done something in your last lifetime or something like that, until I came across this. It was a Jewish, it was a parable or what exactly, but the idea was that hard times, that if you have love or time, that's meant to you know, that only fire hones steel. So if anything, having had a difficult time doesn't mean something bad about you. It means in some sense something good about you, and that helped me. The other thing that helped this last week was I've been thinking about these things that had happened when I was still a child, and you know, and about how things do happen to, you know, babies and children and things. And at least in my situation, I've gotten to the point where I kind of went, instead of feeling bad about all those things that happened and sort of doing, you know, even having like a scientific view of it. Like initially it was kind of, you know, why me? And then eventually I finally got to why not me, because it's a bell curve and somebody has to be at the tail. You know, that was my next level. Now what I got this past week is it suddenly sort of occurred to me that a perspective change of, rather than, you know, oh, this kind of, you know, a lot of amazingly, you know, bad things happened and we're done, that what a miracle that I made it through all of these things, and I'm here, and, you know, life is good, and I could feel, that's something I could feel really good about. And that was just, it was just a perspective change. Anyway, that was during the last week. So that was my sort of trust in the universe kind of thing.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Hannah. And, you know, it certainly sounds like you've been through a lot, and I'm so glad that you made it through, and you made it through to where you are today and here with us. And I do want to comment just in general, and this is maybe wearing my rabbi training hat more than my Musar hat, but there is a lot in the liturgy, and there's in the Torah where it says, you know, if you're good, you'll be rewarded, and if you're not good, you'll be punished. But even within the Bible, that point of view is refuted. And although there are some very conservative elements today that cling to that, the overwhelming majority of the Jewish view is that's not the way it works, is that bad things happen and good things happen. And we haven't done anything to merit the good things, and we haven't done anything to merit the bad things, you know, and people's, and it's so easy to say, oh, well, I'm really smart. That must be because, you know, I'm a good person, or I've done this or that. It's like, no, it's just, you know, whether you think that it comes from the divine or the gene pool or the environment or whatever it is, you know, I didn't do anything to merit that. That's, as a matter of fact, you know, that gives me more responsibility to use the gifts that I have to help other people. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there on the record, that, that's my perspective on the reward and punishment piece. Carol.
I wanted to respond to a couple of things. And first, I want to respond to that question, why me? Why not me? In 2008, when I was diagnosed with cancer the first time around, somebody asked me, don't you think, ask why me? I said, no, I kind of think, why not me? There's all kinds of cancer in my family. Why not me too? I mean, it sucks, but there it is. But I was ruminating on the idea of giving, and that being related to trust. I think Randy mentioned that. And I'm really troubled by people who say, well, I never give to anybody on the street because they're just going to spend it on booze or cigarettes or drugs or whatever. And I'm thinking, how do you know that they're not going to use that to buy milk for their baby? But I trust that when I give to somebody, first of all, it's out of my hands. Once I put that dollar or whatever in that person's hand, it's no longer mine. It belongs to them. It's a gift. It belongs to them. It's not my business what they do with it anymore. And I like to trust, I have to trust in me, that I've done the right thing, and that dollar or $5 or whatever it is might really help that person, will really help that person in some way, rather than assuming. And I really do get annoyed with people, and they're the same people that don't like welfare, etc. usually, who say, well, I'm not going to give anything to those people, they'll just waste it. Well, you don't know that. Trust in the good. It comes back to the mantra that I had for last week, which is stop, make space for the good. So make space for the good. Don't assume the worst of other people. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Carol. And I had an insight from what you said, because often I think of like giving to other people as like an honor issue, a kavod issue, and you're giving to them, out of your own generosity, but also honoring their divine spark. But I think in terms of trust, we're taught in our teachings that we're supposed to be giving to the poor, and we can trust in the divine that this is a good lesson. It doesn't say, give the poor a questionnaire, and based upon what they say, give them some food. It says don't pick up the grain that falls on the ground, and let people come and gather it. It says take care of widows and orphans. It doesn't, it doesn't ask them, do you have a trust fund somewhere, or are you, what have you. So thank you. Bonnie.
I wanted to just pick up on the donation or giving. Having moved, as some of you know, from being an educator into development, one of the sentences that I hated to hear was "give till it hurts." It just rubbed me always the wrong way. And at the very beginning, and I don't think it was within the Jewish community, but it could have been, I heard someone say, "give till you feel good." And that just resonated for me. That I trust in the system. Most of my giving is within, it happens to be within the Jewish community, but my university giving is not. And I have to trust in the system that the university knows the best. So for the most part, I don't designate. Having sat on allocations committees for federations, it's a lot of work. And you do the best you can. And I think that also, for me, goes along with trust. I think people do the best they can. That doesn't mean there aren't bad people. But I do my best to stay away from them.
Thank you, Bonnie. We'll get one more comment, and then we'll maybe just peek at one or two more things. So Karen.
Here's a quick anecdote, and I don't remember where I heard it. It's about trust in the divine and a very observant woman who had many children, and one died at a very young age. And somebody said, well, how do you still have trust in God How do you move forth? And her response, the gist of which was, this soul that was given to me in a young child was here for as long as the soul needed to finish its mission to be perfected. And I thought, wow, how we perceive things, how we see things can make such a big difference. And she never lost her trust in the divine and in her faith.
Thank you for sharing that, Karen. And yeah, that's a very powerful point of view. That's very much what we're talking about. So let's take a look at the spectrum. That was something, Karen, which you had asked about. It's like, well, how can this be on this, on a spectrum? So it's the spectrum of trust, the trust in the divine. And as I shared earlier, the mantra which really encapsulates this is trust in God, but tie your camel. So let's dig in a little bit. What happens, and these are on the slide, so they're pretty easy questions to answer, but I'm going to ask them and ask someone to unmute anyway. What happens if we have too little trust in the divine, or too little trust in the system or the basic goodness of the universe?
You don't come out of your house.
You're stuck.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You're not willing to try anything.
Hmm. Right. Right.
You don't.
And I saw you unmuted. You're going to add
Oh,
something?
that you don't grow.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Love that. There's no growth in the comfort zone, which I think Marianne Williamson said, and there's no comfort in the growth zone either. So it's so yeah. Now, what about if we have too much trust? What does that look like?
You can,
Yeah, Joanne. Oops, sorry.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm not muted, right? Yeah, I think having too much trust, well, if you're saying you trust in God, then if you don't take responsibility, like you don't tie your camel because you trust in God, but the camel runs away, then, when they have that, that joke about it. I mean, it's not so funny, but the man who, in a flood, he's on top of his house, but boats come for him, and finally a helicopter, and finally he drowns, and, and it was like, and he asked God, why didn't you save me? I trusted in you. He said, what do you mean? I sent 2 boats and a helicopter. It's like, you have to do your part, and he comes, come forward and act, that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. And there's almost like a certain arrogance in that, trusting too much. It's like, oh, I'm so important that, I'm going to be beamed directly to dry land. I don't need, the waters are going to part from me. I don't need to take the boat. I got the divine chariot is on the way. So I'm Harry.
Yeah, and people
Hey, if you
are not,
remember to unmute.
I'm going to go back to not having little trust.
Mhm.
And I have a little poem I keep handy when I feel vulnerable. And I'm just going to read it to you real quick and see how it hits you.
Sure.
Okay, hold on a second. It goes like this. To laugh is to risk being a fool. Oh, hold on, I got to move something here. Here we go. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To reach out for another is to risk involvement. To expose your feelings is to risk rejection. To place your dreams before the crowd is to risk ridicule. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To go forward in the face of overwhelming odds is to risk failure. But risk must be taken because the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. You may avoid suffering and sorrow, but you cannot learn, feel, change, grow, or love. Changed by your certitudes, you are a slave. You have forfeited your freedom. Only a person who takes risks and accepts being vulnerable are truly free.
Nice.
So
It's beautiful. Who's that? Do you know who that's by, Harry?
I have no idea.
Can you put that in, make a screenshot of that and put it in the chat? I don't know if you can.
Yeah,
Copy and paste it to
Or
the
share
chat.
the screen? That's
Okay.
wonderful. Thank you.
yeah. I'm gonna give it a try. And I'll put it in chat. Is that what we're gonna do here? All
Yeah.
right.
I think you can copy and paste it.
Yeah.
Well,
So how might trust in the divine help with those things? Harry said that's a great example of maybe having too little trust, and I agree. So how might trust in the divine help us do some of those scary and risky things? Yeah, Carol.
I don't know if it's trust in the divine exactly, but it's trusting, I think, the divine in yourself that, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here and I might get hurt, but I've been hurt before. I can survive this. I can recover. I can fall in love and not be loved in return. That's not, or I can trust this. I can lend this person $20 and trust he's going to give it back to me eventually. And, if he doesn't, I can afford to lose $20. It's not that big a deal. And, as long as I don't get angry about it, it's not. So it's more, and I consider that kind of trusting what the divine has given me, that strength the divine has given me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Makes sense to me. Stephanie, you look like you're percolating. I know you'd asked the question earlier about how might I practice this? I don't know how far we've come and how far have we come in answering your question? You remember to unmute, please.
I think that poem really kind of resonated with me for a lot of answers. And yeah, I'm just going to have to think about that. I hope it's in the chat or something that I can read again. But
can I send it to Greg and he'll put it up maybe next time, or if I can't get it to go?
Yeah, you can send it to me.
It's a PDF, so all right, I'll send it to Greg.
Yeah, send it to me. And
yeah,
if you want it, you can send me an email and I'll try to put it up next week.
I think throughout my life, because a lot of trust has been broken in my life, I feel like that poem resonates with me for a lot of things of kind of retreating into my shell. And so, having a hard time being vulnerable and kind of coming out of my shell again. I think that poem says a lot, and I'd love to really think more about that.
Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing your perspective on that.
I'm sending it to you now, Greg.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Karen.
So I'm wondering how people get prepared to be able to trust.
Can you say a little bit more?
Well, the Boy Scouts motto is to be prepared. And so often we say, things like fortune favors the brave. When we're prepared for different aspects of life, maybe we have the courage to expand our boundaries, to confront, to move, to do things. And so I'm wondering if there's any particular type of preparation that we learn as children, or we could learn, or as adults, or that there's a process over the years that prepares us to be more trusting than less trusting? I know it can make people less trusting, but what kind of guidance is there for helping people to become more trusting?
I
Is
see
there a
couple people
preparation?
raise their hands, so let's see. So Bonnie and then Carrie.
Gary, you raised your hand before I did. Why don't
No,
you?
no, I didn't raise my hand. I'm good.
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead. Go ahead, Harry.
Well, I'm sorry. Did you have, I'm still trying to get this file worked. Did you have a question or a comment? I'm sorry.
Carrie, so Carrie and then Bonnie.
No, I don't
Okay.
have anything. I'm good.
No, Carrie, not Harry. Carrie with a
Okay,
C.
okay.
Carrie with a C.
Okay.
Okay, I think this might partially answer that question. I'm reading a book by Brene Brown called Atlas of the Heart, and her life's work is to explore emotions, feelings, vulnerability. But this passage, there's a section on trust that I haven't read yet, but this caught my eye. Trust is more of a cognitive assessment than emotion. But as we all know, conversations about trust can bring up a lot of emotions, especially hurt and defensiveness. But in addition to that, experience throughout life is what teaches us how to trust or not to trust. So a little kid, if they get food from their parent, then they learn to trust their parents going to take care of them. And it's just that you have to discern, what your assessment is about whoever you meet, and you pull from your past to decide whether to trust or not. And also it are also to trust in the divine, depending on how you interpret it.
Absolutely. Experience is a big determiner for how we show up. And at the same time, I think there are actions that we can take where we can start to learn and cultivate this. Randy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was thinking on that continuum, but I think there's a kind of trust that people can't have too much of, and I don't know quite how to say it, even when, you've looked at everything in life, maybe people that have become wise or whatever, when I'm thinking of the people from the past, like in the Bible, if I think, well, why would somebody hide this baby when they might get in trouble? Why would Moses do this thing? It's not the wisest in human sense. There is there's a belief in good that's necessary in life, that if you don't do it, it's like you're pulling the floor, the stability out under good in the world. I don't know quite how to say it. I thought of a little like saying or thing for me, because if I watch the news, I don't end up feeling this way, but I wrote a little statement for me. There are things of such indescribable beauty and wonder in this world that I can scarcely grasp them or take them in. And if I say that, all of a sudden my focus changes, and I can't hold that thought in my mind and think about all my problems that I somehow, and it's like, well, that's what I need to do, because I'm missing out on things in life. That thing every day has things like that, and without that attitude, it'll slip right by me. It'll be right in front of me, and I won't see it.
I think, Randy, you so perfectly described kind of what I mean when I talk about being in heart space instead of being in head space. And that part of our goal on the spiritual journey is to get is to get away from kind of the logical thinking and getting in touch with sort of an intuitive being with the universe. And so when you say a phrase like that, I can't draw any logical connection for why saying that makes you feel differently. But looking around the boxes, many people very clearly felt the same way you did, as did I. And so I think part of the answer, perhaps, is how do we develop trust is through things like that, is through trying to see the world through a different lens, through a higher lens. And, one of the quotes that I'm just going to pull this up. Let's see. Where is this? It's from Rabbi Tarfon. It is not yours to complete the task, but neither are you relieved of the obligation to begin. This is hard stuff. When we start touching on theology and the universe and the nature of good and how friendly is it? I mean, these are sort of primal axes of meaning of life in the world, but engaging with them and trying to struggle with them and understand them, that's sort of part of the picture, I think, part of the journey. Does that make any sense? Bonnie, I saw your hand a couple of times.
It's okay.
Yeah, okay. So we're sort of have a few minutes left, and I'm just curious, we've gone pretty deep on this. There's a lot of material that we haven't covered. Would people be interested in rolling this over for a third week and sort of continuing to explore? I see a number of thumbs up. Yeah, because there's some very cool stuff that we didn't get to. So I'm a believer that the quality of the experience is what's important, and we can do whatever we want. So great. So we will do a third week of trust. Chaya, I know this is your first time here. I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there anything you'd like to add or any questions or comments?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I'm coming from more of a Jubu perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I've been practicing Vipassana for quite a while. And so I'm trying, for me, and I've really actually just found a wonderful congregation that, because of COVID, that I've actually trust and feel good with. It's actually, I live in Minneapolis, or actually a first spring suburb of Minneapolis. And the group that I found is TAO, Temple Adath Or, down in Florida. Rabbi Mark Labowitz, and I really, really enjoy that. But I've been for years, I mean, I grew up, I would say, conservadox, and I still don't know what the divine is. I mean, I don't know that I understand that word. I'm less dissing it than I did in the past. I mean, I remember I said, I don't know what this thing God is. And one of my best friends, who's, her husband's a rabbi, and they're very much part of Jewish Renewal, said to me, "Don't worry, Chaya, you don't believe in the same God I don't." It's more, you probably heard that statement, but I'm trying to figure out what I do believe in. And I do find myself really believing and, learning to trust myself in doing good, and that what I'm choosing oftentimes is, how is that helping me and helping someone else? I don't know if you can relate to anything I'm saying, but I'm not sure exactly even what I'm supposed to be doing here in a sense. I've always wanted to check out Musar and some of the things there. And I actually talked to, forget what his name is, Rabbi, I think it starts with an M. He came to one of the synagogues here in town a number of years ago, and all I could think of is, okay, so which one of the Rebbes went and talked to the Buddha? Because so intermingled. So maybe you can respond to anything I've said.
Well, there's a lot of convergent wisdom between Buddhism and Judaism, and certainly the Musar strain of Judaism has a lot in common. And I'm glad you're finding a community that resonates with you. And anyone who says they understand what God is all about is perhaps fooling themselves. I mean, we might have some theories, but I think part of like the fundamental premises of my American Musar approach is that you don't need to believe in the divine, and you don't need to be sure about the divine. You can think of it as the universe, you can think of it as anything you want. So there's different views of God within the Bible, and what Maimonides thought of God is very different from what Abraham Joshua Heschel thought. So you're in good company, And one of the translations of Israel, when Jacob's name is changed to Israel, is God wrestler. We're the God wrestlers. We're trying to figure this out. And so when we're talking about this idea of trusting in the divine, which we can't even agree or figure out of what the divine is, it's a pretty, it's sort of a tall order, but I think there's a lot that we can get out of it as well. Because for me, when I'm in that place, there is such a reservoir of kind of positive energy or confidence that can come with it. And sometimes it's just, that little bit to kind of help me get through, a time which is a little bit tougher. Any other final thoughts or comments or questions today before we close? All right, well then.
I just would like to say how much I appreciate everyone in this class. I have changed my schedule so that I am not scheduling myself on Thursday afternoon. And I loved, Chaya, when you picked up the book that Carrie was referring to. To me, this is magical. Actually, it's really Bashert. It's really meant to be. And it's so interesting that we are all over this country and all over maybe the political spectrum, but certainly in our religious practice and beliefs. And yet we can come together. And if we're not 100% sure we agree with somebody, say it. And nobody seems to be offended. I just think it's magical. Thank you, Greg, for pulling us all together.
You're very welcome. Well, we're here because we're all contributing, and I don't think of it as a class. I think of it as a group. I think of it as a community, as a practice group. Because I learn this, I learn a lot from you, and I think we learn from each other, and we're all on this journey together. So with that note, okay, Harry, one last comment.
You got the poem. I don't know if you checked it, if I have to resend it.
I got it.
Got it? You may want to forward it for the next session, which would be great.
Well, that'd be nice.
Yes, I'll include it with, yes, I don't know the best way to do that, but I'll figure it out. I will figure it out. Okay, so let us all close our eyes. Once again, take a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. Let's turn our attention to the light that's filtering through our eyelids. This is the light of our divine spark. Feel the warmth, the love, the comfort, and understanding. Allow yourself to connect with that presence. It's always there. It's always there to hold your hand. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, friends, I'm wishing you a very happy new year. May you all stay safe. May you all find support in community. And may you all come back again next week.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, healthy
Shabbat
And-
shalom.
Yes,
22.
yes.
I
Shabbat
love
shalom.
Thank you.
You're right, Greg.
Thank you all for letting me in. I appreciate that.
Appreciate you.
Yes, thank you for coming.
I'll see you next week.
See you again.
Great week.
Very
Have a
good.
great everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.